All right, everyone, we've got continuous good news in the European sphere with regards to, outside political movements. They're no longer outside, really, is the real truth, and that's why they have to be optimistic. AfD in Germany, topping out at 18% recently, now officially. If that number is to be believed, the second most popular party in German politics. That endangers the coalition that's been built by Merkel with her slumping support. What you've got is a situation. Nobody else probably can hold the coalition together, so you may end up with more Angela Merkel. So long as that happens, she's the symbol of ineffective, corrupt, tyrannical, far-left German government. And you can call her a Christian conservative or whatever you want. She's a leftist. In everything but maybe corporatism, corporate neoliberalism is just a form of leftism. It's the neocon mentality. It's, hey, I should be able to make your decisions for you, but I'm going to make sure that the corporation you work for, I don't abuse them too much, because I want to make sure they keep donating to my campaign, whether above or under the table, as the political situation may be. And this isn't the only good news we see within the political sphere. People are waking up all across Europe, but it's beyond Europe. This is not a situation as it's been cast off by members of the left. Oh, it's about European supremacists. It's about like Nazis and stuff. No, it's extended way beyond. Mexico is being run by what's essentially a nationalist right now. He just happens to be a pro-welfare state left-wing nationalist, but he's nationalistic. You see it rising up in Canada now. A new party forms and already I think has like double-digit support almost. That's fairly revolutionary. It doesn't happen very often. You see nationalism surging in other parts of the world. You look at Brazil, where you've got an individual who gets cast off as like he's chauvinistic and far-right. If you listen to what he's actually suggesting, beyond maybe meddling with Maduro, which at this point it's like, go ahead, you probably should. One of your neighbors is destabilizing. It's causing a mass exodus of people. At some point you have not just a right, but a responsibility to move in and restore order to some degree. Even if they'll still end up under socialism. Let's not kid ourselves. Venezuela is not going to magically become a capitalistic country because Jair Bolsonaro takes control of Brazil, marches 100,000 dudes up there, and lays waste to a bunch of commie guerrillas. He can do that all he wants. He can kick out some of the commies, but more will just end up coming through. It's just maybe they'll be more sane than before. And temporarily things would get better, I think. People wouldn't have to eat their pets. They'd be doing what they did in North Korea and eating like mulch milkshakes instead. We didn't have to eat fluffy this week. We can hold off and see what happens. This mulch is, it's pretty tasty. Just put some lichens in it or something. Some fucking seawater in it. Get a little bit dehydrated and delirious. You have some hallucinations. You forget that you're hungry. Just make sure to wake me back up with a cup of real water an hour later. No, but AfD is one of the greater success stories. You have similar stories. Sweden, with the Swedish Democrats rising up quickly. I was still shocked that they don't have secret ballots in the nation of Sweden. It's like, our socialist democracy is perfect and utopian. We don't even have secret ballots. Oh, yeah, obviously, at the ballot box, it's going to look a little bit less like people are given over to complaining if every outside group is ridiculed and you can potentially get punched outside of the polling place. Legendary levels of corruption, I guess, starting to grow in parts of Europe. You have a similar story, certainly in Hungary. Orban's already in charge. He's a populist. He's not really fully nativistic, although he is more on that side. He's more of a general populist, but he is a little bit out there. Poland has gone full populist now, even though, again, it's not Eurosceptic populism. It's essentially, we don't want to abuse member states populism. We like Europe, we just want a different style of governance in Europe. That's basically what some of these groups boil down to. You see that replicated maybe in the Czech Republic, to some degree, I believe in Romania, Bulgaria, some of these states. Eastern Europe is more pro-Europe, oddly enough, but the flames are rising up on either side, so to speak. And then you have Bolsonaro, you have Duterte. Duterte would be a good example in this. China is essentially a nationalist regime. Russia is basically run by nativism at the moment, or after a fact, pan-nativism, I'd say. Basically, hey, you've been part of the Russian experiment for a while, you're Russian, Chechenian, whatever, Siberian native tribes, okay, I don't care about that, just be Russian, though, and by the way, I'm, going to have authoritarian meme laws, because I don't want my fifis hurt, basically, says Putin. And he did. Some people still look at him as a strong arm, as a strong man or something. It's like very funny to see someone who is essentially pushing geriatric stage be so good at propaganda that they can convince people that they're like the big stick charismatic. Trump's been doing this too. Ultimately, he is a 70-year-old man who's somewhat overweight, and he is sort of the gentle, inner city elite. He's not like a rugged outdoorsman who chops down trees all day. But if you look at memes about him, you wouldn't know that. Same is true. Bolsonaro shows his own mortality. Gets stabbed and nearly dies, although he's recovered now. He's, I believe, entering the campaign again fully. And he's slated either to come in first or close second. It's not clear whether he wins on the first time around or whether they have a runoff. If they do, they probably defeat him. The problem being that 40% of the population or more is going to be extremely upset. There will probably be those who say, well, if he hadn't been stabbed by this, paid shill assassin, would-be, then he would have campaigned more and he would have won. There will be that. There will probably be protests. Yeah, there will probably be protests and riots all over Brazil if Bolsonaro loses. There may be protests and riots even though if he wins. Like yesterday, all the press could talk about there was, women are coming out to Me Too Bolsonaro. They're saying not him because he's a sexist. And groups were protesting all over Brazil, but it's like they're not going to focus on the crowds that are following him around listening to his every word because he's supposedly far right. AfD is supposedly far right. Now you've got a Jewish bloc within AfD. I wonder fucking why that would possibly happen. Could it be the rise in anti-Semitism in Europe doesn't have to do with a homegrown European mentality that was pretty much all but completely destroyed over the past half century anyway? Oh, yeah, maybe it's that. Maybe that's why Angela Merkel is not beloved by the Jewish community in Germany anymore. Maybe it's because people feel like she's not protecting them from groups of people that really have said some horrible things about Germans and Europeans in general. When you point this out, it's like considered a conspiracy theory or something, but it's demonstrably true. It is absolutely the case. Look, I can go to CAIR, CARE International, and all of these other groups, and I can literally see the rhetoric right there. It's very open, very public, and it's in fact tolerated by the left. And yet you wonder why, sort of the globalist pan-neoliberal groups are losing favor among, maybe groups like Jews. I would look, if I was Jewish, I definitely wouldn't be voting for Angela Merkel if I were in Germany. I probably would have joined AfD. I said, yeah, okay, there's a few skinheads here who want to kick me out too. Ultimately, though, they're the ones that are trying to defend the status quo. I kind of like the status quo. Leave me a fucking alone. All I want to do is play Farming Simulator all day. Or whatever the Germans do now. It's like you got to do Farming Simulator because they paved over all the rest of their farms to make, like factories and shit. It's very, very funny. Gotta go to Bavaria before it stops existing altogether and get some like Bavarian cream pie and stuff. All that stuff's really good. No offense to the Germans, but I mean you're being led by incompetent morons. They talk about how Angela Merkel is so she has a master's degree in chemistry. Okay, she obviously has a lack of understanding of basic political strategy. She's ripping apart her own coalition, watching her enemy grow, and what's the establishment decide to do? It's the same trick and the same never-working trick that has been tried before for centuries. We'll just suppress them. We'll ridicule and mock them. We'll try to conduct surveillance. This is how the Nazi Party actually began, the suppression and the victim mentality, able to be used as a political issue as well, is one of the main selling points that caused their rise. The same is true of the communist parties at the time that were a big number two within Germany. And in some cases, in some elections, were ahead of the National Socialists. Those two groups rose up in part because they were being suppressed by an establishment that was seen as inherently corrupt. It was seen as inherently corrupt, out of touch, not caring. And that's exactly how the coalition ruling Germany is seen, I think, by most Germans. It's just a matter of they can't agree on what alternative yet to have. AfD is easily the biggest. They are not a modern-day Teutonic party. They don't appear to be particularly bigoted. They're saying that the alternative is we will restore the borders we had before and stop some of this PC nonsense because it's not helpful. That is not an out there platform, but they still get called like all sorts of names. It's basically like if you look at a vague liberal party, let's say center-left party, and like, oh, look at the bunch of commies, they're going to be like, no, but it has nothing to do with us. That's sort of the same mentality of the establishment when it aims Nazi claims at AfD. Or when Bolsonaro, when they say, well, he's basically a hardline far-right nationalist. No, if you look at what he's saying, it is not hard-right. And it's only vaguely nationalistic. It's certainly not ethnic in nature. It has nothing to do with an ethnicity. Nationality, yes, in the Brazilian sense. But he's not saying, hey, we're going to close Brazil's very expansive and Amazonian borders to everyone else and be insular and isolated. It's not what he's saying. In a way, he's a little more than a globalist anyway. He's just saying he's a globalist that doesn't want to abuse people quite so much. He believes in restoring order to a country that's been abused by socialism for too long. And you get a lot of countries like that. The United States needs to tear up more of our regulation and taxes. And stop being world police, stop doing the proxy war thing. It's very funny to see self-proclaimed liberals supporting all that bullshit. It's very funny. They've been so propagandized to, they actually believe that's what it means to be a liberal. Hey, a liberal believes corporations should tell you what to think and what to say. A liberal believes that you should punch people for their political beliefs. A liberal believes that someone should be put on trial in the court of public opinion, crucified without evidence all the time. That's not what it means to be a liberal, but, the Republicans score cheap points here when they, overlap liberal and Democrat, which aren't 100% overlap, and when they talk about that, even though the term's being misused not by the right, but by the left itself. A social justice warrior is not fundamentally a liberal. No, they're just an authoritarian. I'm going to talk about the WAPO article with regards to that next. That's about all. Peace out.